President's Healthcare Task Force, a group focused on championing Obamacare. On the 4-year anniversary of this law, I think it's important for us to reflect. Now more than ever, we have to dispassionately investigate and determine whether Obamacare has helped our fellow citizens. Unfortunately today, fewer people have health insurance than before Obamacare became law. Millions of policies have been canceled. Premium increases have destroyed the budgets of middle-class families. The quality of patient care has declined, and confusion and anxiety now affect too many Arizonans. In a moment, you're going to hear from the doctors themselves, the folks facing these challenges every day. We need to hear their stories, and we need to listen to their patients. The healthcare system in America was not nirvana before Obamacare. There were many problems that desperately needed to be addressed, like making sure people with pre-existing conditions could get covered, or ensuring that bankruptcy wouldn't follow an unexpected medical problem. But unfortunately, Obamacare took the prior problems in our nation's healthcare system and amplified them. Republicans are always accused of being against everything. Well, not this one. I firmly believe in challenging the status quo in search of real reforms that abide by the Constitution and better the lives of every Arizonan. I support patient-centered reforms that will bring down costs, increase quality, increase access, and increase choice. Patient-centered reforms should put patients first, not government bureaucrats. I support a tax code that doesn't discriminate against individuals purchasing insurance on their own, separate from their employer. Today, individuals have to purchase insurance with after-tax dollars, unlike companies. Individuals should receive the same tax benefit as corporations. I support expanding health savings accounts. These 401k style accounts put you and I in control of our health care. HSA reforms would allow us to put money, tax-free, into a personalized account available for any medical purchase. I support expanding the marketplace across state lines. Obamacare limits our choice to 4 options, just 4. Platinum, gold, silver, or bronze. We're a unique and diverse people with endless differences, desires, wants, and ideas. Our healthcare insurance options should reflect our national diversity. I support expanding high-risk pools for people with pre-existing conditions or who are chronically ill. I support block grant funding Medicaid to the states in order to cover the least well-off among us. These reforms will increase efficiency and localized decision-making, allowing for flexibility and choice. Arizonans will have a very clear choice in November. On one side will be my opponent, Congresswoman Kirsten Sinema, champion of government-run healthcare. And on the other side will be me, a champion of patient-centered reforms. No one has the right to tell you and I what doctor you choose, what coverage you choose, and what treatment you receive. So I'll let Congresswoman Sinema defend the broken promises and canceled policies of Obamacare, while I defend the families who've lost coverage. I'll let her defend the drastic cuts to Medicare, while I defend seniors. I'll let her defend higher premiums, while I defend hardworking Arizonans' budgets. Arizonans trusted Ms. Sinema when she said if we like our plans, we can keep them. Sadly, despite all the evidence to the contrary, she recently said the fundamentals of Obamacare are still sound. Millions of people would disagree. So with this, I'm going to invite Dr. Jeff Singer to share a few words, his experience, and the experience of his patients.
I'm Dr. Jeff Singer. I'm a general surgeon in Phoenix and Scottsdale, and I've been practicing for over 30 years. And over the last few years after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, I can tell you that not only are patients' choices being limited, but doctors' choices in the way they can treat their patients are also being greatly limited. Increasingly, doctors are being forced to practice according to guidelines and protocols that are drawn up in Washington by the people who ultimately are responsible for paying the bills, or for the people who are ultimately responsible for paying the bills. Doctors are being told told that this is the way you will practice medicine, and if you don't practice according to these ways, then you'll be penalized. That creates ethical problems for us because our oath is to put the interests of our patients first. That's the number one priority. When I'm required to practice according to one best way that was determined by some committee, with the interests of the person paying the bill being behind the determination of that best way, then that is asking me to practice according to the interests of the payer rather than the interest of my patient. That puts me in a very big ethical dilemma. In addition, because I'm forced now increasingly to have to practice according to, do my work according to guidelines where I have to focus on compliance, that takes my eyes off the ball. I'm constantly having an eye on whether or not I'm in compliance rather than whether or not I'm doing the right thing for my patient. I oftentimes think now I understand what a lot of public school teachers are complaining about when they complain that they're forced to teach to the test and to meet requirements at the expense of teaching their students. So we end up having students that graduate A-plus rated schools, except they don't seem to know how to read well, or they don't know a lot about American history, but they have A-plus rated schools because they met all the core measures and the teachers checked off all the boxes. And a lot of teachers we know are very frustrated. Well, now doctors know exactly how they feel because we're having situations where increasingly I'm having to check off all the boxes. It doesn't really matter whether the outcome is good as long as the box is checked right. In addition, in order to comply with all of the regulatory compliance costs, in conjunction with the fact that reimbursements have been gradually dropping each year to doctors, more and more doctors find themselves unable to keep their doors open, and they're becoming employees of hospitals working shifts. In fact, it's roughly 70% of doctors in this country now are employed by hospitals or corporations as opposed to being in their own practices. And when you work for a hospital or corporation, that really alters the patient-doctor relationship because now the doctor tends to view the patient as the hospital's patient or the corporation's patient rather than his patient or her patient. And when you're working for the hospital or the corporation, which is also under the same pressures to have these guidelines and protocols met, then your employer tells you, the doctor, you will either meet these guidelines or you're fired. So again, not only is it making us have an ethical dilemma where we're not being able to practice with the interests of our patient placed paramount, but it's affecting the entire quality of care that's given. You have these ironies, like, for example, there was a Professor Kim at Albert Einstein Medical Center in New York reported about 8 months ago that his unit at Albert Einstein Medical Center, the surgical unit, proudly had 100% compliance with the requirement that the urinary catheter be taken out of the bladder on post-operative day 1. Didn't seem to matter to anybody that during that same period of time when they had 100% compliance, the post-operative urinary tract infection rate went up. That really wasn't important. What was important was they had compliance, so everybody got attaboys for meeting the compliance guidelines. It's very similar to what's going on in education. This really worries me about the future of patient care. Finally, I'm very concerned about the future of innovation in medicine because new techniques in surgery, new treatments, methods using pharmaceuticals or other kinds of treatments require, if you're going to innovate, innovators think outside the box. But we're constantly being forced to practice inside a box that was drawn by our regulators. It makes it very difficult to innovate because innovation requires going outside the box. So I really am worried that it's going to stifle innovation in treatments, therapies, and surgical techniques. With that, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Dr. John Ammon, who's a noted anesthesiologist in the metropolitan area. He's actually served on the American Board of Anesthesia, and he's got also over 30 years of practice experience.
Thank you, Jeff. I've been asked to address several issues about the quality of care under the now existent Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. Many roles in healthcare that physicians play, predominantly the most important key role is the care of patients, the effort to achieve the best outcome. I believe that role, the relationship with patients, is under enormous threat and will decay in years to come if the Affordable Care Act stands. about the Affordable Care Act that are of most concern to me. As many of you know, the Affordable Care Act mandates $718 billion to be taken out of Medicare financing over the next 10 years. Now think about that. It approaches $100 billion a year of less payment for Medicare patients. Those are our senior citizens I happen to be one of. That means that the monies available for the care of senior citizens will pay into the system, have supported America, will pay taxes, some of whom have fought in wars, given up limbs, families that have produced the miracle of America in many ways, will be compromised enormously. The law does this by a board called the Independent Payment Advisory Board, IPAD. It's 15 unelected people, unaccountable to Congress, appointed by the President, working in the bowels of Washington's bureaucracy, who will decide what the pricing will be for all the therapies, all the diagnostics, all the procedures that apply to Medicare patients. And ultimately, as the insurance industry, in the process that's now occurring, begins to collapse into a utility run by the government in the years to come, the design of this law, it will apply to all patients. A comparable board in the United Kingdom is called NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence. A great term. But if you look at the effects of NICE in the United Kingdom over many years, the survivability of patients, men with prostate cancer in 5 years is 53%. Current survivability of men in this country with prostate cancer under the traditional medical system that we've had approaches 95%. Why is that? It's so different. The bottom line is it's the government rationing of health care. I was once told by someone that, well, of course it's 53%. They don't have as much surveillance. They don't follow men as they age as closely. I go, point made. Those men, each one of them, falling through the cracks, falling well into the 95% survivability as a grandfather, as a father, as a brother, as a worker, as a taxpayer, as a citizen. That's a quality of care issue. And the IPAD, not just for prostate cancer, for mammography, for virtually every procedure, for every therapy, will be restricting care. Why? To pull $718 billion out of the system that is infinitely more expensive than billed 4 years ago. Very, very major effect on quality of care. One that should affect the thinking of every American, in addition to every doctor, but certainly every American, because you will be subjected to this. The Affordable Care Act and the IPAD concept is a political and financial model for health care. It is not a model of patient care and quality outcome for patients, which we as doctors committed to, we took an oath to, training for, we're educated for, we continue to educate ourselves, and we deal with those principles every day. That's the first principle. This government, IPAD, this law will not address that issue. The second issue, the medical device tax. The medical device industry is a small industry. It's made up of entrepreneurs, innovators, small companies that eventually grow, possibly bought by other companies, larger companies. They're the innovators who make insulin pumps, orthopedic devices for joint replacements, defibrillators, pacemakers, devices for chronic pain control in patients who are enormous suffering with chronic pain syndromes. The Obamacare tax on that industry is not a tax on a particular device. It's a tax on the revenue of these companies, which did not buy into the law in 2009, so they're being punished with a tax. Already, 40,000 jobs are in the process of being lost in that industry. And that industry will stagnate. The development of new products, of new ways to take care of patients, to advance the quality of care of patients throughout America, every American, every one of your family members, your children, your parents, your cousins, everybody will be affected by this. And the basic principle of health care, we as physicians stand very fixed to, is that if the quality of health care, the advances in medicine don't go forward and advance, they don't stand still, they stagnate, they decay. And this this tax, one of 23 or 24 taxes on all Americans, irrespective of the $250,000 limit that was quoted in 2009. All Americans will pay dearly for this financially and ultimately in terms of quality of care. Third and last issue is my concern about the doctor-patient relationship. Our Hippocratic oath, our reasons for being doctors, what we do every day to get up and take care of patients. We are concerned about the care of each individual patient. That's what we do. We're trained for it. We spend a lot of years getting good at it. We advance ourselves throughout our careers. We take considerable risk to do it. And we really care about our patients. This law, this model of healthcare, which is a government system, the government healthcare system, really addresses what's considered to be the healthcare of the society. If you look at Ezekiel Emanuel, one of the architects, Donald Berwick, one of the recent directors of Medicare and Medicaid system, these people see healthcare as a societal issue. Therefore, it's embedded within a cost model. They see it in a much larger sense, kind of out there in terms of cost and what America's paying for in terms of the healthcare it gets. These are doctors, but they're not practicing doctors. They're bureaucratic, political kind of people. Very different from us who practice in the trenches with patients every day, night and day, weekends, holidays. We really focus on the outcome, the quality outcome of each patient. This relationship we have with patients, we're devoted to, a constant part of our practice and the outcome of our patients' well-being, is really at risk. This is a quality of care issue. And I like to do an analogy between UPS and the United States Postal Service. We know that before 2009, going all the way back to the 1960s, healthcare required enormous reform, not the quality. The quality advanced despite all the government and insurance malfunction, the dysfunction that occurred as government regulatory input became greater and greater from Medicare and Medicaid. Insurance companies lost all competitiveness because of the state mandates and so forth. All of those things impaired the relationship with the doctor, the relationship between doctor and patient. But we still advanced. Since this law, that relationship's really, really hurt. Look at you, UPS driver. I buy a few textbooks, or my wife buys a gift for the grandkids. That UPS driver pops out of his truck, knocks on the door, boom, it's gone. It's going to the next client. The service is perfect. Everything is done right. It's a private sector model. It's a competitive model. Okay? Look at the U.S. Postal Service, a government-run mail delivery system. How many times in the last decade have we heard that we're not going to have Saturday deliveries anymore? It's too expensive. We can't afford it. Tens of billions of dollars are lost by the United States Postal Service. 2/3 of the stuff I get is junk mail. Okay? That's Obamacare in the future. A correctly reformed system overcoming the competitive or the non-competitive insurance model, the incredible tax inequalities for citizens, and so much government regulation. Reforming that into a patient-centered, market-based system, which can be done politically, it can still be done if the choices are correct in November and beyond, is the UPS system. I vote for the UPS system. As a physician, I insist upon it. And we all face, as Dr. Singh said, a terrible moral dilemma. Doing what the government tells us to do, the statutes, guidelines, boxes that we check, versus the oath and the dedication and the passion and the commitment we have to our patients. It's a very dire future unless we can do something to correct and ultimately reach a point politically and nationally that we can actually invoke the reforms that we always desperately needed to never go back to status quo. But the current model of healthcare, 5, 10 years from now, Americans will wake up. How do we produce this thing?
My name is Andrew Kaplan, and I have been practicing in Arizona for approximately 20 years. I am a cardiac electrophysiologist who specializes in heart rhythm management. I unfortunately have seen the negative effects of the Affordable Care Act over the last several years in several important ways. First has to do with the change in the payment structure in terms of accessibility to care. We're not talking about accessibility to insurance coverage, but specifically accessibility to care. With regard to that, insurers are now required to provide insurance plans to all patients, regardless of pre-existing conditions, and at any point in time that they wish to get it. As a result, they have set up their premium structures to be as low as possible, but as part of that, they have built in extremely high deductibles and high copay requirements for patients. I have personally seen patients who have had to decline undergoing potentially life-saving or life-altering procedures because they cannot afford an enormous copay required of them when they get to the hospital for the procedure. I had a patient this week who had to go to the bank and draw out almost $2,000 so that they could give it to the hospital to come in the door to receive the procedure that they really needed. This doesn't work for patients. They can't get the appropriate testing that they need, they can't get the appropriate procedures. So whereas the plan may have provided access to coverage, it doesn't provide access to care. Second, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the effect that the medical device tax has had in terms of my ability to practice. The device taxes have resulted in a threat to innovation on the part of medical device manufacturers within this country. No longer are the major pacemaker and defibrillator companies willing to engage in clinical research to prove that benefit of specific features of their devices. They had to take that money away. They've also had to take money away from education. The education that used to go to physicians so they became more aware of clinical indications for care and when to refer their patients to specialists for treatment, as well as direct patient education, which can help them to understand how devices can work for them. And then finally, as a physician who is involved in a group practice, I have come to understand the negative effects of the Affordable Care Act as a small business owner. We have seen increases in costs because of need to comply with regulations, because of the need to install electronic medical records, etc. And likewise, we've had increase in taxes on our business, taxes on us personally. The result of that is that we're far less apt to open up new offices, to hire new physicians, to hire new personnel within our practice, to expand product lines, to add diagnostic testing equipment that all may be for the benefit of the patient. We, like other business owners throughout this country, feel hampered and crippled, not knowing from year to year what the effects are going to be on our costs for providing insurance for our own employees. We have desperately held on to provide coverage for our employees rather than having to drop their coverage and force them into the federal exchanges. And I don't want to see that in the future. I want to feel that I'm able to take care of my employees the same way I take care of my patients, to provide what's best for them. But this act is providing nothing but barriers in that regard. I see a very dangerous future for us lying ahead if we don't change things, if we don't repeal and reform and create new alternative methods. There has been mention about the ability of the marketplace and free enterprise to provide a better solution, and I think that's clearly true. Unfortunately, physicians are hampered at this point in time because of antitrust statutes. We cannot collaborate, we can't discuss costs of care and what our pricing is going to be, and it makes it more difficult to share that with the consumer and come up with the best pricing structures that might work to offer them the best care at an affordable price. I would like to see major reforms take place in Washington with regard to this law so that I can continue carrying out my mission in life, which is to provide the best care for my patients.
Well, I want to thank the doctors for being here. Rebecca, thank you. This isn't about my campaign. This is not about me. This is about getting this right. We have to get it right for the patients. We have to get it right for the medical providers. Health, admittedly, is one of those things you take for granted until you do not have it. and I am guilty of that. And so for the people that actually have to interact with these physicians on a weekly, monthly, perhaps daily basis, this is about them and making sure we get this right for them. So my campaign is simply the vehicle by which I hope we can bring these patient-centered reforms to Washington. And with that, I think we're done. Thank you all. Rebecca, if you have any questions, we can certainly, we can do that here in front of the camera. Maybe we can pick those up. And if you have questions for the physicians too, by all means.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, how you doing over there? What's your name?
I'm Colin.
Colin, nice to meet you. I'm guessing you're a tracker. And thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Come closer if you want, man. I'm not going to bite.
Gotta get the whole frame.
Yeah, well, I understand. This is politics, right?
So, a lot of the reforms and suggestions that you've made today have been made by other Republican candidates, including Vernon Parker last election. Voters turned him down and elected Kirsten Sinema, who, as you said, was a big proponent of this law from the beginning. Why will voters react differently to you as a candidate when you're proposing the same changes?
Well, first of all, I would say I paid pretty close attention to the last cycle, and I don't remember hearing Mr. Parker make this a center theme of his campaign. I supported him in his last campaign, but I think what's most critical now is after having the 4 years, today is the anniversary, and the evidence of the Affordable Care Act, I think it's central in voters' minds. Florida, the race against Jolly and Sink, I think illustrates the importance of emphasizing healthcare and the state of healthcare in our nation. So for me, I think that that's going to be a center theme in this election, and also simply because Congresswoman Sinema was the only delegate from the state of Arizona to serve on the President's Healthcare Task Force. And so people are going to have a very simple question. Are you better off today than you were before Obamacare was passed? It's the old Reagan line. And so we're going to find out in November.
I'll pick that up.
Please, please.
I think a very important part of your question, and I'll agree with everything Andrew says, is that in 2010 or 2012, when Mr. Parker ran, the Affordable Care Act / Obamacare was still an abstraction for most Americans. It had been passed in 2010, 2.5 years before the election, and much of what is happening today wasn't even on the horizon. You know, since then, that's why it wasn't the major campaign issue that it could have been. But since then, you know, we've not only seen 7 million individual policy holders lose their policies, and that's many more people than 7 million. Those are families. That could be 10 or 15 million people. Remember that there's been a political offset of the employer-based insurance policies until 2016 or until after the election. And we're on schedule to cancel 80 million policies in this country because they're illegal under the Affordable Care Act. So it is now no longer an abstraction. Americans are getting hurt. There are more people uninsured today than there were before this law. And once 80 million or 120 million people are forced into the exchanges by virtue of all these policies being canceled as employer-based, which become illegal under this law, those regulations written in the summer of 2010 and voted down after the Republicans tried to pass a law not to allow those regulations to occur. All these policies are illegal, and they're all going to be broken and canceled. And so you've got half the country about to lose insurance, and then only put off because of the 2014 midterms. So it wasn't an abstraction. It's no longer an abstraction, which it was when Mr. Parker ran.
In fact, polls at that time, in the election of 2012, well, firstly, the Affordable Care Act has never been popular. There's always been a majority opposed to it as opposed to those in favor of it. But now, as you know, between Gallup and Pew and others, the unpopularity of the Affordable Care Act is at an all-time high. And that's because now people are finally feeling it. And up until then, it was was something that was being discussed. It was an idea, and you were either for the idea or against the idea. Now it's an action. It's a concrete reality. And if it wasn't so unpopular, then I'm sure the administration wouldn't be delaying some of the more painful things that are about to come until after the November election of 2014 and 2016. Well, at least there's a reason why they're postponing it. It's because they don't want people even more angry. That itself tells you that they know people.
Andrew, some of the things that these physicians have mentioned is cuts to reimbursement rates, some of the money that Medicare is getting in terms of fees to doctors. But without cutting and trying to shrink some of those costs, how would the nation stem the rising healthcare costs that were bankrupting a lot of people?
Yeah, in part the $716 billion taken out of Medicare, changing the rules of the game right in the middle of the road for many seniors, like my grandparents, for example. I don't think it's helpful or a reform measure to do that. So that's a situation that needs to be addressed, and unfortunately Obamacare, as I stated before, makes that situation worse. But in terms of bringing down the costs of healthcare in this nation, choice, competition, any of the measures that I talked about earlier, whether it's reforming the tax code, allowing you and I to be able to purchase our insurance with pre-tax dollars, health savings accounts that puts you and I in the driver's seat. Dr. Kaplan mentioned transparency in pricing. That's something that, while ultimately can be a state's issue, that allows you and I to now interact with our physician and determine whether or not this is a procedure that we actually need, or is it one of those procedures that we're actually going through simply because they have to check the box because the bureaucrat told them this is how they have to practice medicine. So competition and choice really are powerful influencers on the market in bringing down costs. And any of the reforms that I mentioned, I think, are to get to that place. Tort reform is another one. But admittedly, tort reform is a state's issue. And Texas is an example of a state taking the lead on tort reform. Arizona can do the same, the legislature. But from a federal perspective, that's not necessarily something that that would be a member of the federal Congress to address. But it's an example of a market-based solution, a local solution to bringing down the cost of healthcare, which ultimately has to, increasing the quality and bringing down the cost has to be the central focus.
You don't feel like that was a driver for the creation of Obamacare?
Certainly the architects would argue that was a driver for them, but I would say the results have been the opposite, unfortunately.
Is it good for all Americans to have insurance?
Ultimately, yes, but what's more important than having insurance is getting care. I think that has to be remembered in the entire conversation and the discourse of healthcare reform in this country, that what's more important is getting care, getting treated. And so for me, ultimately, that's where I set the bar in this debate, is whether or not patients are getting quality care, whether or not it's affordable, ultimately, because many people are denied with insurance, and that's unfortunate and unacceptable. Too many people are denied just because they have insurance doesn't necessarily mean they get quality care.
But it is more than no care, according to the emergency.
Actually, can I take that on this?
By all
It's
means.
his press conference, not mine.
Yeah, please, absolutely.
You got 44% of doctors nationally reportedly refusing to take Medicaid. You got increasing numbers of doctors dropping off of Medicare. So just because you have a card doesn't, all that, if you're a Medicaid patient, increasingly that doesn't, all it does is give you access to a waiting list, access to a search book to try to find a doctor who can take your care. And as you probably know, the Oregon Health Insurance Experiment, which was this very unique opportunity to prospectively study 10,000 people who were put on Medicaid and 10,000 who were followed. What was discovered was that when people went on Medicaid, the increased usage of the ER went up 40%. But the outcomes were no different. The people who didn't go on Medicaid had the exact same, or cash pay, have the exact same healthcare outcomes, but the utilization is much less. So this notion that that getting people more healthcare coverage is going to decrease ER visits, it flies in the face of the facts. And just, I think it was 48 hours ago, a report by the Associated Press, no, a report in JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, reported that emergency usage is an all-time high in Massachusetts, where they have virtual universal health coverage because they passed sort of a version of the Affordable Care Act in 2006. Emergency usage has gone up to more than double. So the notion that getting people a card that gives you name of coverage is going to get you health care. The reason these people go to emergency is they get into the doctor's offices. So that's why, because the doctors don't want to take you. And the card doesn't do you a lot of good.
One of the additional side effects of insurers trying to keep their premiums low is that they have created very narrow networks, specifically of doctors and or hospitals who will take the lowest amount of money possible in terms of reimbursement. There have been many top national medical schools and top physicians across the country who have been excluded from these networks. Places like Duke and Stanford and Harvard and the Cleveland Clinic are no longer on insurance plans, so patients don't have access to the top quality care that they may need. So that's one way it's been hurt. There have also been an increase in the number of doctors who are retiring or are closing their practices altogether and going into working for insurance companies, etc., because they can't afford to keep their doors open. They can't afford to stay in practice because of the costs of their employees and the other overhead that goes into maintaining a practice as reimbursement is cut every year. Our practice in particular almost went under several years ago, and it was only through extreme cost constraints, letting people go from the practice and tightening things up, that we were able to keep our doors open. If we had not, there would have been thousands of patients disgorged into the area who no longer would have had physicians and would have had to find others. The payment system also does not discriminate between the highest level of care provided and the lowest level of care provided by different providers and different physicians across a marketplace. Whereas in many other industries, if you want a top professional, you'll pay more for that professional, and if there's somebody who's not as experienced or not as adept, you won't. If we can switch to a model that rewards higher quality of care, the outcomes being better, the patients reaching their targets of better blood pressure control, better rhythm management, less utilization of hospital resources, less readmissions, reward those doctors, that will help to drive patients to those physicians, and you'll end up getting better outcomes. What has happened recently through changes in the payment structure is that they've pushed many more things to be done in the hospital setting, which we all know is at a much higher cost. And so patients can't afford necessarily to go to the hospital for a procedure that they used to be able to get done in their doctor's office. And as a result of that, they just decide not to have it, so their care is negatively impacted. So I think if we create a smarter private care marketplace model, instead of trying to recreate the VA model, which we all know doesn't work. We hear stories regularly in the news about veterans returning from war who can't get access to health care, who can't get access to rehabilitation, who can't get access to psychological services. If we had just given them private insurance and let them go wherever they could go, they would be able to get that because there would be enough doctors and other providers in the marketplace to meet their needs. Instead, we try to do it through a structure driven by bureaucrats that really doesn't work.
And your question kind of implied that what's driving this concern by physicians is a reimbursement issue. And that's not really true. You know, the fundamental insurance model before this law was so broken. And I'll give you an example. When I go into the gas station, I have State Farm auto insurance. I don't tell somebody at the gas station to wax my car, rotate my tires, fill my tank, and by the way, I have State Farm auto insurance. But that's what health insurance is. It's designed to be first dollar coverage. It's a broken model. It started in World War II with the wage and price controls, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse, complicated by infinitely doctors and patients alike want is a better financial or cost control structure of medicine. And the best way to do that is a market-based, but especially a patient-centric model. The excuse that the government used, or that the left used to make this law, was that cost was out of control. Well, the CBO estimated over $2 trillion of debt generated from this law in the next 10 years, now that it's up and running. And it's not even up and running yet. So I don't want to hear that someone thinks that the doctors are concerned about reimbursement. We have to keep doors open. We have to pay employees. We have to buy stamps and computers. That's the cost of running businesses to take care of patients. But to be done in an efficient, cost-effective, price-transparent way is the model that works in America. That's a market-centric, patient-centric model. Government control, like the United Kingdom, like the Canadian system, does not work for high-quality patient outcome and universal access.
You know, every single industry, right, when new products come out, prices eventually come down. Remember, whatever it is, whether it's a cell phone, DVR, any sort of new technology comes out, it costs a lot of money, and then within a few years, because of competition, the price is driven down. I can't think of anything that hasn't gotten less expensive and more abundant, except for healthcare. And that's because the thing that distinguishes healthcare from every other industry is that in healthcare we have a third party, whether it's an insurance company or Medicaid or Medicare, wedged between the consumer and the provider. So you can't have competition for prices. You can't have a market. You know, go into your doctor's office and ask your doctor how much does it cost to have a certain procedure. And they probably can't answer your question because it's not decided by them. It's decided by a third party. So when you don't have a market, you're not going to be able to have prices come down like it does in every other sector of the economy where there's a market.
Colin, you got me? Well, thanks for coming. Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it, doctors. Thank you so much.